pleasure last night to meet several of you at the reception, and so I have a little introduction to all of you. I also wanted to say just at the outset that Nathan Dorff has been really terrific. And Nathan, you know, whether or not we're talking about the traditional museum or the modern museum, that kind of helpfulness really never goes out of style. So I wanted to thank Nathan. I know your work has extended to many, many people who are here. And I also want to say about Jenny's remarks, she really put us in an interesting place here as she talked about how good we are. We know we're good, and I'm going to continue to talk about that. But I'm also going to talk about the fact that even though we know we are really good, there's a lot of our public that doesn't. There is a lot of policy making and all that goes on that really leaves us out. And I think one of the most important pieces as we talk about the promises and the perils of being modern is that we will continue to be excellent, but we also may continue to stand at the margins of our communities. All that I have to say is about really moving our position right to the center. So thank you for your remarks, because I'm going to come back to some of those very important points. This is a really intriguing topic. I've been thinking a lot about what does it mean to be modern? And what are we really talking about as we confront change? And it's occurred to me as I thought about it, I'm sure you all have your own definitions, but basically, is what we are confronting here some kind of very deep-seated and very, very fundamental change in the way in which we operate. There would have been a time a few years ago we would have called it a paradigm shift. But there's something here really extraordinary that is going on. On the other hand, we really can talk about being modern in terms of really making a lot of superficial changes. And I'm not saying superficial in a negative way. We can talk about being modern by adding a lot of the kind of bells and whistles of contemporary society, better tools for communication. We can be on Facebook and Twitter. We can have more hands-on, interactive components in our galleries, a greater focus on partnership in our community. And all of that's very important. But I think the more we think about it, we need to think about the roots of this modernism and what it means that we are confronting today with a huge number of very significant questions about our identity and our purpose in a changing world. I think we're all feeling a little anxious. Certainly every time I go to see whether we can make payroll, I feel a little anxiety. There are issues here of sustainability, and there are issues of thriving, and we're all hoping that we're somewhere on that sustainability line. But there's some issues here also about what is going to happen to us in the future. I am sure, and I mentioned this last night to my table partners, all of you must be aware that when the huge funding came about, our Reinvestment Act, that originally there was actually legislation that would have eliminated all museums. And while that legislation did not hold in full, it remained, including zoos and aquariums. So what's with that? There we were, included by Congress in a list that listed things like casinos, swimming pools, and museums. There is really something wrong with how Congress and other policymakers and other people who have authority to make a difference are viewing who we are. We have a challenge in front of us, not only to be modern, but we have a challenge to reach out, to look at how we communicate the values that we hold so dear. I have just finished editing this book, An Alliance of Spirit. It was fascinating looking at what has happened since 1993 when I edited another book, A Museum and School Partnerships. And I was both intrigued and excited about changes and discouraged that we continue to work so hard at what we do. We're the ones who keep those museum-school partnerships going. We're the ones that every time that friendly administrator leaves the school system, we go find somebody else who will stay as our champion inside. And once again, I am concerned about the role that we play here and the recognition for that role. I found myself at the beginning of that book drawing on a favorite image of mine, and those of you who heard me speak have probably heard me draw on it before, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the change in museums in the words of one of my favorite fictional characters, Holden Caulfield, from Catcher in the Rye. There's one of the great passages about museums in that book. And Holden is off looking for his sister, and he thinks she may have gone to the museum. And as he's racing there, he's remembering a little bit about his own experience. First of all, he thinks about very sensory memories. He describes sweaty hands holding the hand of somebody in line. He describes the sound of a marble dropping on the floor and sort of, you can hear it bounce along. A smell of rain, dark cavernous halls with brightly lit dioramas out there. And he says the best thing in the museum was that everything always stayed right where it was. Nobody moved. You could go there 100,000 times, and the Eskimo would still just be finished catching those 2 fish. The bird would still be on their birds still on their way south. The deer would still be drinking out of that water hole with their pretty antlers and their pretty skinny legs. And the squaw with the naked bosom would still be leaving that same blanket. Nobody would be different. The only thing that would be different would be you. Now, at first, Holden seems to feel real comfort in that sameness. But when he reaches the museum, he says, a funny thing happened. All of a sudden, I wouldn't have gone inside for $1 million. Now, Holden's reasons for not going inside, and those of other people, are certainly very different. He certainly had his own problems. But there are a lot of reasons why people do stay away. We may think nostalgically about Holden's museum experiences. I remember some that were very similar. But in fact, the museum that he described for many people no longer holds relevance. So while the dioramas of the past might still hold perfectly still, our world truly has not. We are rocked by change. Without even focusing on the last year or 2 years or 3 years, there's just so much there. We know that the patterns and structures of the past, the institutions, the way we do business, the way we communicate, the way we learn, the whole of the world around us is dramatically different.